I am gonna cut to the chase. EarthBound is not for me. It doesn't disgust me in the same way Mother disgusts me, but it's certainly not for me. In my experience, the Mother community is very mature, so I hope everyone understands that while I don't like the game, you all are free to. I understand why it's such a beloved game, and I want to get into that as well. It's not as if I don't understand the praise, I just don't fully agree with it. First things first, EarthBound is a marked improvement on Mother. Strange, given it begins near identically. Name your 4 party members, dog, favorite food, and favorite thing that'll become relevant later. Ness wakes up to paranormal activity, goes to investigate, then sets off on an adventure. Your mom feeds you your favorite food, you talk to your dad on telephone, you never see his face, he deposits money for you at an ATM. Yeah, this is a shinier version of Mother. Sort of like how Super Metroid is a shinier version of Metroid, or how A Link to the Past is a shinier version of Zelda 1. Though with all of those examples, they aren't carbon copies. Neither is EarthBound. For starters, the character creator has added a Don't Care button, which will auto-insert the canon names for our protagonists, so while it's still possible to insert yourself and others into the game, it's much easier for people who, well, don't care to pick the default names instead. This is also the debut of Lloyd. I'm sorry, I had to. I really don't know how I screwed up Lloyd's name for Jeff in the last video so many times. Yeah, so this is Jeff alongside Ness, Paula, and Pooh. Ness wakes up in his room, similar to Mother, but this time there's another event keeping everyone awake at night. A meteor has fallen on top of the nearby mountain, and there are police everywhere investigating the crash site. Immediately, the story has a bit more of a foothold in EarthBound. That isn't to say it's better, but it feels like it has more prominence than it did in Mother. You investigate the crash site with your neighbor Picky, who wants to go search for his brother Pokey. There was nothing like this in Mother. Not only do the neighbors seem interested in this seemingly paranormal event, but you also get to go investigate and spend a little time soaking in the event. In Mother, you broke a few lamps, stopped a doll, changed out of your PJs, and went to go save the world. You heard from townsfolk about the outburst of psychic mishaps, but you never saw anyone affected by it. In EarthBound, there are sightseers trying to get into the crash site, your annoying neighbor Pokey bugging the police officers. The fact that there are actual police officers guarding the crash site, it allows the world, just for a minute, to feel somewhat more alive. You're even given your call to adventure a bit more organically. Well, as organic as talking to a psychic beetle from the future. At least it's more believable than your dad randomly assuming you're about to go on an adventure because you beat up a floating lamp. It's still pretty cliche, Ness has to go save the world from an alien invasion of some sort. You're just told in a little more detail, so the game has a slight bit of urgency to it. Though, I wouldn't exactly describe the tone of EarthBound as urgent. As was the case in Mother, EarthBound is an adventure to save the world with almost zero stakes. Sure, Gigas is a threat, he's name-dropped several times, and he's the final boss. His henchmen are around, kinda. Master Belch blocks your progress at one point, I think. Yet, it isn't as if Gigas is making advances on the human world or anything. The towns you visit seem fairly untouched. It's not like there are flying saucers everywhere abducting human beings, even though the intro to the game sorta suggests that would be the case. Everyone is living their mundane lives, spouting random parodies of popular tropes of that era. The road to Gigas doesn't build tension in the same way other games would. Stopping Gigas involves traveling to the future, so his defeat isn't a necessity, at least not right away. Judging by the state of the future, Gigas does eventually take over the world, so there is a sense of urgency, it's just undercut by the leisurely hunt for the 8 melodies. Ralph Waldo Emerson once wrote, "Yep, we're quoting poems now, baby. Life is a journey, not a destination." If there ever was a game to fully embody that quote, it's EarthBound. Gigas is a formality, an end goal. While the end of the game is memorable for its own reasons, the journey to the end of the game is what everyone remembers about it. The zombie-infested city of Threed, Saturn Valley, Master Belch, the towering skyscrapers of Fourside, Pokey's recurring antics, Tessie, the Kraken, the Runaway Five, the Underworld, Tenda Village. I could go on and on. Each of these moments are unique, and the game spends a lot of time focusing on moments instead of the goal you're working toward. Let's take the Runaway Five as an example. You help them out of debt, twice actually. The first time is in Tucson. You receive a wad of cash for saving Paula and use it to pay off the Runaway Five's debt. In return, you get to watch their final show, and they procure you a safe passage to Threed on their tour bus. What the game has done here is make progression interesting. Instead of walking to Threed, you catch a ride, making the trip faster and strengthening your bond with the Runaway Five, perhaps so you'll be more willing to help them once you reach Fourside. They've gotten themselves into a deeper pit of debt, one you'll need to help them dig out of if you want to progress. After all you've gone through with the Runaway Five, watching their shows, helping them out of debt, it sticks in your mind. Let's look at another example, the Kraken. You need to make the trek from Summers to Scaraba by boat, and the sailor warns you of the Kraken before you take the voyage. Instead of sitting back and watching the boat ride, you get attacked by the Kraken in the middle of the voyage. It's random, strange, sticks in your mind, and that's important for several moments at the end of the game. Upon obtaining the 8th melody, Ness has a bit of an inner journey, which I presume to be like Magicant from the original Mother. In it, you meet Master Belch again, you fight various incarnations of the Kraken, and you fight your inner evil in the form of the Mani Mani statue, a statue that's been wreaking havoc across the world. Then, during the fight with Gigas, Paula has to pray for help from everyone you've met along the way. Ness's mother, sister, dog, the Runaway Five, Dr. Andonauts, even Frank, the mob boss you fought in O-Net, chimes in to help. It's this wonderful moment highlighting your adventure across the world, all the people you've helped, all the people who've helped you. You stand together to defeat Gigas. Yeah, it's cliche, I admit, though that doesn't render the moment ineffective. It has the opposite effect. It accentuates each moment. It's also memorable thanks to an intense commitment to being weird. Moments you remember in games are often breathtaking, serene, graceful. Taking in the beautiful vistas of Xenoblade Chronicles, the lush world of Final Fantasy XV, dangling off a mountaintop in Uncharted 2. These moments are all memorable because they're beautiful, even if one of those scenarios has the added benefit of being extremely tense. EarthBound's moments are mundane, helping a band out of debt, riding the bus, talking to the townsfolk about capitalism. However, it walks a fine line between this mundanity and the absurd. An alien abducts Paula in the Fourside department store, turns off all the lights, and demands you go face him at the top. After doing so, you enter a parallel dimension of Fourside where everyone thinks an opposite. There are floating paintings, weird NPCs who teleport you around the city, and the neon lights that replace structures. It's fucking weird, there's no denying that. The music reinforces every single oddity. For example, here's the theme for Moonside. Hell, here's the theme for Saturn Valley. Here's even the theme for Magicant. weird. Everything is so fucking weird. That isn't to say there aren't memorable normal songs in EarthBound. I think this song would have something to say about that. It's just that a lot of the music is constructed to be weird, in order to reinforce that EarthBound is weird. Did I mention it's weird? Weird. Often, it can distract from EarthBound's lack of a character-driven narrative. Like the original Mother, Ness and his band of friends don't really communicate very much outside of the first time you meet. Sometimes Jeff will chime in to talk about how he can fix a machine. There was that time when Ness woke up from Magicant and Paula asked him if he was alright, or when you get Paula back from Monotoli. Though I'll give the game props, I really enjoy the sections where you play as Jeff and Pooh before they meet up with the main party. It's a nice change of scenery, foreshadowing to areas you'll be visiting later on, and you get a glimpse of the culture each of these characters live in. A sense that you're recruiting people from across the world to aid in your adventure. Jeff from the snowy lands in the north, I assume the north, I don't actually know where it is geographically, or Pooh from the tall mountains in the east, training for spiritual enlightenment, or whatever the hell this sequence is supposed to be. I still don't really understand this section. It's slightly terrifying. He gets all of his limbs ripped off and then his brain stolen. Was he killed here? You know what? Fuck it, I don't get it, I'm just gonna move on. I would have liked if the four interacted more, built a chemistry, developed in some way, but it's clear EarthBound wasn't made for that, and it can better achieve what it sets out to do than Mother ever could. Mother definitely tries for the same thing. A wacky adventure with a bunch of kids who save the world from aliens, bundled into a parody of other JRPGs. Unfortunately, Mother lacks the substance to back up its thesis. All of the towns look the same, there's too little direction as to what you're supposed to be doing, and the weird moments of the game aren't as abundant or pronounced. Sure, you drive a tank and shoot a giant robot with it, you explore a creepy mansion, you travel to Magicant. These are all weird, but I'd hesitate to say the game pronounces them. They feel disjointed because there aren't enough of these moments and the game focuses a little too much on the quest to fend off the aliens and save the world. Plus, there aren't any characters to latch onto, if even for a little bit, to ground the story. There aren't any equivalents to Apple Kid, to Dr. Andonauts, to the guy who takes your photo every 5 fucking seconds. In this respect, EarthBound is a clear realization of everything Mother wanted to be, down to the stellar writing. There are too many memorable quotes to count. I built a bulletin board without a message. My wife ran away again. I'm such a lucky man. I also helped in the battle. I threw my slippers at the beast. You guys can't envision the final collapse of capitalism? Incredible! Not only does EarthBound write a successful satire of other JRPGs, I genuinely feel it manages, even if only slightly, a gameplay satire of other JRPGs. Recall this moment after you reach Saturn Valley. One of the Mr. Saturns gives you the password to enter Master Belch's secret lair. It is, quite literally, to sit still for 3 minutes and do nothing. I went to go enter his lair, sat there, browsed Twitter for a while, wondering if maybe this was a joke. But no, after 3 minutes, you're allowed inside. I've already mentioned helping the Runaway 5 out of debt several times, but just think about the absurdity of it. You feed a hungry man out in the desert, and because you fed him, a fucking croissant or something, he digs a massive fucking hole in the ground and finds buried treasure. You use this buried treasure to pay off the Runaway 5's massive debt, who tell you themselves they'll probably be useful for dealing with Monotoli. Sure enough, after you've gone through the department store, Moonside, Monotoli's huge building, the Runaway 5 appear out of nowhere and beat the shit out of a boss for you. Moments like this raise a variety of questions about progression. Why do so many games have weird stipulations you need to meet before you can move forward? Why do many of the tasks you complete seem a bit meaningless? Why am I doing any of this in the first place? EarthBound has the balls to ask questions like this not just through witty dialogue, it does so by using the interactive medium to its fullest potential. A true satire. All of this is why EarthBound is special, why so many people love it, why it has such a huge cult following. This is the greatest strength of EarthBound. There's nothing like it. I can't think of a single relevant comparison to EarthBound at the time. Of course, now there have been games inspired by EarthBound, like Undertale and Lisa, which are just as weird and toy with the interactive medium in similar ways. But for the longest time, EarthBound was one of a kind. Even with the existence of similar games nowadays, it's still hard to say EarthBound has ever been topped at doing what it does best. It's hard to say, but I can say it. I'll remind you, I started this video off saying EarthBound is not for me. Although EarthBound is so much more successful at what it sets out to do than Mother, it still falls short in a few key areas. Unsurprisingly, a lot of my complaints with EarthBound can be found in my video on the original Mother. Where else to start but with the combat? I'm not gonna pretend the combat didn't improve, because it did. I got a lot more use out of my PSI abilities because it felt like I needed to against some of these enemies. PSI Shield felt a lot more useful because many of the bosses had strong PSI attacks, especially near the end of the game. Buffing up my party to withstand attacks like that was nice, and I appreciate the ability from Jeff to spy on the enemy and get their defense and offense stats as well as their weaknesses if it's available. Jeff isn't as useless as Lloyd was, even though his primary means of attack is still through bombs and bottle rockets. Though it is strange that his specialty is using consumable items, the inventory slots have been expanded to house 16 items instead of 8, and purchasing bottle rockets is pretty easy once you reach the Forsyth department store. Plus, what saves Jeff from mediocrity is that his bottle rockets do an insane amount of damage, and his regular attack output is respectable. If you run out of bottle rockets, Jeff is still useful, and I didn't feel the need to immediately go refill his inventory when he was running low. You also get a permanent fourth party member in this game, a bit of a jack of all trades. He can use a shit ton of PSI abilities, sitting right up there with Paula in usefulness for both buffs and offense-oriented PSI, and his attack output is nothing to sneeze at. What I like about this party lineup is that instead of giving each party member strengths and weaknesses, it's more like each party member is on equal footing, but they have slight strengths and slight weaknesses. Paula is a bit frail, but she has a devastating attack output. Jeff has a potential for high damage, but you need to fit all of it into his inventory, and he isn't weak without his items. Whereas Ness can buff or heal in addition to a decent damage output. No party member clearly outshines the other, each of them have their uses in any of the fights. Maybe Pooh feels a bit weak when you first get him, but when he learns Starstorm, he's practically unstoppable. The jump to the SNES had a very positive effect on the battles. Pulling off a smash attack is even more satisfying than it was in the original, and the unique animations for PSI Fire, Rockin', Freeze, Starstorm, I love them all, especially the unique sound effects that go with them. Adversely, getting hit with a mortal blow feels devastating, watching the numbers tick down as you desperately try to keep your party member alive until they inevitably die and the UI turns red, accentuating their death. I do want to touch on the rolling health numbers really quick. The concept of rolling health sounds cool on paper. Giving you a chance to save your party members before they die is not only helpful, but very intense. I can't say it hasn't helped me during my playthrough. I appreciate the inclusion of it. However, I really don't like the implication it has for the game's difficulty balancing, as well as the execution of the rolling health system itself. Having a system like this would imply the game will have moments where you'll take a massive hit, more than your hit points can handle, on a regular basis. I don't like this implication. Band-aids to core issues like funky difficulty balancing really don't cut it, though I suppose if EarthBound had implemented the rolling health meter in a serviceable way, I wouldn't be too upset. Rolling health is just way too difficult to manage early game, and only really useful when your health is super high. The problem is that health rolls at the same rate no matter what your maximum HP is. While it's easy to manage when your health is really huge, it's not so easy to manage when you have 80 or 100 hit points. At that point, by the time you've selected a healing ability, you're probably already dead. Even when you're at the point where your health is huge, you'll have 4 party members. During battle, you need to sit through the battle text and wait for each of your party members, as well as the enemies, to attack, defend, buff, or do whatever they're going to do. Say a party member takes a fatal blow, and the numbers are scrolling down. Depending on when that was in the turn, it could be a long fucking while before you could get healing to that character. Ness is the only party member with dedicated healing PSI for the longest time until you get Pooh, but he's also the slowest character in existence. It's already a bit of a maze to navigate to PSI, which has subheadings for different PSI abilities, selecting the subheading, navigating to the right level of life up from alpha to beta to gamma to omega, and then selecting Paula. Keeping in mind that because Ness is so slow, you'll probably need to spam the A button so everyone auto-attacks to whip through their turns, and you'll have no idea what the enemy will do. I've had cases where the enemy does a PSI attack, one that hits every party member, so I have to sit through my party members being attacked one by one instead of at the same time. After all that nonsense, fuck the healing, my party member's dead. Everything I said in my mother video applies here. Without your party members, they don't gain experience. You can't use them to fight tough enemies, and the process by which you need to revive them is a chore. You don't get a PSI ability to revive until over half the game is already over, and that ability to revive is signposted so incredibly badly. They put it under Healing Gamma, a line of PSI abilities that deal with status conditions. In Mother, there was a revive spell, clear as day. It gets across exactly what it does just from the name. You use it, and would you look at that, your party member's alive. In EarthBound, though the game does tell you what each of your PSI abilities do, you need to go into the status menu to check. I never did this. I decided to check what they did by experimenting. I assumed, because Healing Alpha and Beta dealt exclusively with different status conditions, that each of the levels just helped you deal with more severe status conditions. I may have been in the wrong here for not checking what the PSI abilities did as I leveled up, but I figured the game was pretty straightforward in leveling them up. Life up progresses logically. It heals a different amount of HP until it starts healing max HP, and then it heals all of your party members at once. There aren't any hidden bullet points like there are with healing. It's simple, straightforward. Why couldn't there have been an extra menu slot to fit a revival spell in the game? Because the game hid the revive so well, I didn't even know I had a revive until I was already at the 8th melody. Surely this can't only be my fault because I didn't feel like opening my menu every single time I got a new ability. It feels like I was punished for using common sense to discern what each of my abilities did. If Mother hadn't had a revive spell, I wouldn't even be as angry, but it did. I had an expectation that, at some point, I would learn a spell called Revive. This is relevant because, same as always, reviving party members via other means is a royal pain in the fucking ass. Yet again, you need to see a doctor, you need to pay the doctor's fee, though you don't actually need to sleep in a hotel this time because the doctor will also restore PSI, so at least that's fixed. The problem still persists. If you're in a dungeon and you've lost a party member, what are your options? You likely don't have Healing Gamma yet, there aren't any items to revive party members until late in the game, and your only other revival option is to leave the dungeon. Do you trek on without your party members' help, and also without getting them any experience? Or do you leave, likely encountering a bunch of enemies on the way out that have the potential to make that trek out much faster if you can't run away fast enough? Oh, did I mention running away from battle is still really hard? Yeah, that's still there. While I'm fumbling about in the dungeon, maybe we can talk about how encounters are triggered. This time, you can see the enemies before you engage in a battle with them. There are 3 ways to initiate a battle. The normal way is by running into them head on, but there are 2 other possibilities. If an enemy walks into you while your back is turned, they get to attack first, but if you run into them while their back is turned, you get to attack first. Much like the rolling health, it's a neat system on paper, and this time it doesn't come with any worrying implications about the design of the game. Again, it's just the implementation that leaves a sour taste in my mouth. First of all, the hit detection on this system is really wonky. EarthBound goes for the pseudo 3D sprite-based graphical style, and I think it works pretty well, except for dealing with enemy sprites. Trying to figure out when your back is technically turned or when their back is technically turned is a bit of a nightmare. Add to that the sheer speed of enemies. Holy fuck, look at them go. Your default walking speed is pretty slow to begin with, but enemies just plain outclass you. If this system was supposed to fix random encounters, supposed to allow you to get a one-up on the enemy by sneaking up behind them, well, it falls flat on its face. I've never intentionally snuck up on an enemy. Whenever you get in range of them, they instantly face towards you and run straight for you. As you can imagine, trying to escape enemies is nigh on impossible because they will catch up with you whether you like it or not. Sure, maybe it's a tiny bit more frustrating to have a battle start without you seeing where it came from, I concede that, but this system is almost no different. You know you're about to get into a battle, you can see the enemy running toward you. At that point, you're resigned to your fate. You're getting into a battle whether you want to or not. This system is only useful after you defeat a Sanctuary Guardian or when you're over-leveled. In both of these scenarios, enemies will run away from you, which is probably the only time you'll be able to sneak up on them for a preemptive strike, and possibly to skip the battle entirely depending on your level. Cute, cutting out the easy encounters because the game knew they'd be a waste of time and just giving you the experience. I appreciate that, not enough games do that, especially the grindy ones. But it's not frequent enough. Most of the game is you seeing an enemy, wondering if you can get past them, and then remembering, small corridors, no chance of making it past an enemy walking twice the speed of you. Dungeons this time around aren't as labyrinthian, but they are still fairly long. It's clear the point is to get you into as many battles as possible, but I appreciate that finding my way through them is way easier. As I mentioned before, they start to become a problem when you're deep into one and a party member dies. While one-shots aren't as frequent in EarthBound, they happen often enough that leaving the dungeon is still something you'll probably be doing, either voluntarily or involuntarily. Sometimes that's okay. Master Belch's lair is fairly alright because there aren't too many enemies to fight on the way to Master Belch, and Saturn Valley is right next to it for selling items, healing up, all that jazz. Plus, once you defeat Master Belch, you open up a shortcut inside of Saturn Valley. I can't sing the same praises of the underground mine in the desert. Picture this. There's a healer for status conditions outside of the dungeon, and a free hotel. Sounds cool, right? Here's the catch. There's no doctor. If one of your party members die, here are your options. You can walk a fair distance down the road to activate the bus stop and go to 3 or 4 side by bus, or you can walk to 4 side, which takes about as much time as it would take to walk to the bus stop on the other side of the fucking desert. Once you're at 4 side, the hospital is on the other side of the fucking city, so you walk all the way to the hospital, making sure you don't attract any old ladies or evil cars on the way there, then walk all the way back to the desert to start the dungeon again. You'll probably do this several times if you lose Paula, who, remember, is very frail. The enemies in this dungeon are surprisingly fierce. The rat bosses especially have attacks that can one-shot Paula, and trying to deal with the status conditions from poison to sunstroke will drain your PSI pretty fast. This is a pattern the game is proud to repeat. The dungeon under Stonehenge is one of the longest dungeons in the game, and though there's a laboratory outside of the dungeon that will instantly revitalize your entire party, you'll have to leave it first to activate it. Inside of the dungeon are a bunch of long walkways with some very tough enemies. Your first run through this dungeon, I doubt anyone will anticipate the Gold Starmen, who reflect PSI abilities back at you. So you're gearing up for some devastating PSI abilities on the Golden Starmen, and would you look at that? All of that damage flies back at you, in addition to an attack by the Gold Starman and whatever cohorts he might have. They don't appear until you're pretty far into the dungeon, and you're pretty likely to lose a party member from that alone if you aren't quick enough to save them. I tried to press on, but once I made it to the boss, there was no surviving the onslaught of enemies he summons to help him out. Maybe part of this frustration could have been alleviated if I knew what healing Gamma did, but I didn't, and I still partly blame the game for that anyway. Here's another fun story, something I dealt with for half of the game and didn't learn until I got to Magic Hand. For some reason, Ness had really bad accuracy. I couldn't explain what was going on, he just wouldn't hit things. I mean, look at this. Miss, 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 miss. What am I doing wrong here? Ness seemed to miss more often when he was the only party member left alive, so I thought maybe that was why? Or maybe Ness just had a terrible luck stat or something? I honestly couldn't figure out what it was until I had a gander at my equipment. I found a new bat, so I decided to start comparing stats to figure out if the bat I had just picked up was better. It wasn't. I looked at my currently equipped bat and wondered, I got this bat a pretty long time ago. Why is this so much stronger than everything I'm picking up? I looked at the bat using the help command in the menu, and sure enough, the bat has a tendency to miss. I figured this out while I was in Magic Hand, after I had already gotten all 8 of the melodies. I know what the comments are going to say, and you'll probably still say this even after I acknowledge it, but I really still think this is partly on the game. Weapons seemed to fill a stat quota before then. I had no idea they had other attributes, mostly because to check what a weapon does, you need to bumble into the help menu buried under so many button presses. Most of the time when I checked a weapon, it just displayed the stats. I thought, well, I probably won't check any of the weapons if they're just stat exchanges, there's really no point. That worked out well for me, eh? Even if I learned how to read, why is this bat here in the first place? The damage trade-off between this and a regular bat is so minor. Is this a good value proposition to anyone? It makes Ness look like he missed batting practice. He missed almost every fucking turn for me. I can't help but feel this bat was put into the game just to trick unsuspecting players like me. I have no proof, maybe it wasn't programmed in with malicious intent, but I still fell victim to it. They still didn't fix this clunky as fuck inventory management that dissuaded me from looking at item help descriptions in the first place. Creating more slots does not fix the core problem. You can only sell items one by one. You can only toss items one by one. Trying to sort out your inventory takes a fucking century. You can't even throw away some of these items. I understand why you can't throw away your key items because you'll need them to progress, but why can't you throw away a broken machine? Better yet, why can't you throw it away once Jeff fixes it? Hoo boy, an HP sucking machine, how fucking useful. It misses all the time and doesn't suck enough HP to warrant being used over a regular attack, but I can't fucking get rid of it unless I call this guy who takes a couple seconds to reach me, and then he can only take 3 of my items at any given time. Why 3? Is it because it's realistic? I know this game is a satire, but this is going a little too far. If you want to dump all your items, you'll need to go talk to your sister, something you can't realistically do until you get the PSI ability to teleport. Side tangent, you still need to teleport the same way you did in Mother, and though it's a lot easier because you can run around in a circle, I still ran into a bunch of stuff trying to fucking teleport. Why is this so needlessly complicated? Once you get to your sister, she can only take your items one at a time, just like selling them. Fun. Alright, I won't pretend EarthBound doesn't fix some of my complaints with Mother. The flow of income is much steadier because you get a lot more of it, and you don't have to spend it all keeping your party out of limbo. I could spend a lot more tricking out my party with cool equipment from the department store and buying Jeff some sick bottle rockets, one by one. The game also establishes your goal a lot better than it did in Mother. You get the Sound Stone and can check by using it that you need 8 melodies, along with many NPCs reminding you that you need all of them. You don't need to talk to random cacti, ducks, or do a bunch of random disconnected tasks to find melodies. Plus, once you reach the underground, there's a huge statue that tells you where all of the melodies are, since you need all of them to open the way to the final melody. Maybe the game felt more like it was on a linear track, but I vastly prefer that as long as I know what I'm supposed to be doing. I also can't say the combat is bad. I have had some fun with the system. Hitting enemies with PSI or regular attacks is as satisfying as I mentioned before, and there are a few bosses that present a welcome level of challenge. I also think it's neat that some of the bosses have weaknesses, like the jar of fly honey for Master Belch. He reacts in a pretty amusing way, and you're rewarded for remembering that seemingly throwaway text box from one of his minions at the beginning of the dungeon. You don't even have to grind anymore, since although your party members do start out at lower levels, getting them up to speed is as simple as fighting a few enemies while you're already on the linear progression path. You don't need to halt all of your progress to get a new party member up to speed. All of this is great, it's what I wanted, it's what I asked for, but too many of the same issues persist. I could never say EarthBound is terrible, but it's so bogged down by many of its dated elements that I can't help but get the same unique experience elsewhere. Undertale has so many wacky, crazy elements to it that I love, so many unique, memorable moments that spawned a rabid fandom. I won't disparage EarthBound because Undertale exists, especially because Undertale couldn't exist without EarthBound, but I think the existence of Undertale proves just how flawed EarthBound is. While it succeeds in its satire, I don't think it succeeds in too many other of its areas. The combat is fine, but there's nothing too stellar to rope me in, and the difficulty balancing isn't exactly perfect. The rolling health meter seems innovative on paper, but the game underutilizes the mechanic in the same way it botches the encounter system. A bunch of long dungeons, fighting enemies, worrying about your party members dying, traveling out to revive them, worrying about PSI points, managing a super clunky inventory. There's just so much about EarthBound I can't put up with to get to the good stuff. This is why I'm not the biggest fan of EarthBound. This is why it's not for me, though that can't stop me from admiring the game a great deal. It's a unique experience. There's really nothing like what EarthBound provides, even with the existence of better games. Playing EarthBound is almost worth it just to experience the game for yourself, to see what all the fuss is about, to watch the Runaway 5, to fight your inner demon and watch as you gain a fuckload of experience, to see Pokey evolve from your dick neighbor to the servant of Gigas. EarthBound is an experience, and I don't regret experiencing it. Sure, it is a lot of other things. It's a grander, more polished Mother, a more straightforward, less grindy game than its predecessor. It has so many unique moments, trippy music, a meaningful satire of other JRPGs through both its narrative and its gameplay. It's a special game, not without its glaring issues. The rolling health meter and back attacks are hyper-situational, and I wish it could have smoothed out the rough edges, preventing me from ever wanting to come back someday. EarthBound is Mother, it just isn't as shitty. It actually has something going for it. I will remember EarthBound. I'm just not sure how fondly. Next, we'll be covering the final game in the Mother series, Mother 3 for the Game Boy Advance. It was never released outside of Japan, so I'll be emulating it. Seems like a lot of people hold Mother 3 as the best in the series, and I'm looking forward to seeing if a Mother game will finally click with me. Trust me guys, I really tried. I guess we'll just have to wait and see. Join me then, if you will. Until then, that's the end of the video. If you liked it and want to see more videos like this, consider supporting me on Patreon. You don't have to if you don't have the money. I just ask if you have the money and if you're generous enough to support me. Every little bit helps, and I will never pressure you. I love all of you equally. Something you can do without spending money, let me know what you thought in the comments. Agree? Disagree? You probably disagree? Just lay it all on me. I value engagement far more than I value views, so please, if you want to yell at me, you probably do want to yell at me. Whatever you want to do, just know where the comment section is. It's down below. Well, until Mother 3, I hope all of you enjoyed the video. My name has been KingK, and I certainly hope you have some well-deserved fun today. Please, don't yell at me.